We have two producers from the show who are going to talk us through this and the factors behind this. So I will introduce Stephen Joel Brown, who I think you're on my left-hand side, maybe you can wave, who is based between Los Angeles and New York. Stephen has 20 years of experience in film production, management, operations, sales and marketing, with stints based in Turkey, Italy, Germany. Some of your early credits were Seven, Fugitive, A Perfect Murder, and you've worked in all sorts of capacities behind the scenes too. And then we have sitting, I think, in the south of France, near to Saint-Paul-de-Vence, normally based in Paris, is French producer and production manager Raphaël Banolil. Raphaël is a go-to person if you're shooting in the French capital and across France. His CV includes The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Patriot, and Mission Impossible Fallout, which was an amazing production, I think, and we can understand all of the challenges that must have been around that. So we're going to talk to both of them about Emily in Paris and shooting Emily in Paris. But before that, we have a short video introduction from the CNC president, Dominique Boutenat.
Good morning and welcome everybody. As CEO of the CNC, the French film agency, I would like to take the opportunity of the talks here at Paris Images to convey this very simple message to all international producers who are considering a place to shoot their next film or TV series. France is open for business. As of today, over 400 films and TV series shootings have been finalized in France since the pandemic started. And after a short interruption in March and April 2020, the activity has restarted in May and has not stopped since then. This has been possible only because we have taken all measures to allow movie and TV shootings to take place safely. Of course, you already know that France has these unique combinations of landscapes, history and technical savoir-faire that I'm sure will make your production a success. But what you still don't know is what we can offer more. I will say just 4 points today. First of all, about safety, which is of course a major concern in this COVID crisis. French production service companies and technicians have worked hard at creating efficient safety protocols with mask tests and special measures that allow shootings to limit the COVID risk drastically. Second point, very quickly after the first lockdown in March 2020, the CNC has worked with the government so that movie and TV shootings could be excluded from the following curfews and lockdown measures. Shootings have not been interrupted since May 2020 in France, even at night, even in public places. That's how we happen to become, in only a few months, the most powerful and organized hub of shooting of Europe at least, and maybe of the world. Third point, we've implemented a fast-track procedure to allow audiovisual professionals to enter France for work when the level of sanitary security allows us to, of course. It's all online on the English version of our website, www.cnc.fr. It's really quick. You just have to upload your documents and we process the request so you can get a validation, usually within 24 or 48 hours. Fourth point, and the last but not least, we've recently strengthened our tax rebate with a new 10% additional bonus so that you can get 40% of tax rebate of all expenses provided if your production spends at least 2 million euros in VFX. If not, you still can get a 30% tax rebate on all eligible expenses. Isn't that tempting? Actually, it is. Our country has a high tradition of welcoming productions, artists and movie makers from all over the world. It's our way to see business, it's our way to see our relationship with other countries, and even more, it's our way to see life. So please, feel welcome to come and shoot in France. Do not hesitate to contact our team at CNC, Vincent Florent, or at Film France, headed by Stefan Bender. will give you all details you need to plan your next production in France. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Yeah,
we're back
I
on.
think we're back.
Well, I mean,
Right.
one of the takeaways from that is quite amazing. Is 400 productions have still shot in this period, which is interesting. But that's not the subject of today's talk. So just going back to Emily in Paris, Raphael, how did you get involved in this series?
Pretty simple. I've got a call from the producers from New York and from Paramount as well, and they've contacted me seeing if I was available, and I said yes, and and that's it. I think it was a few years that I was in touch as well with them, because I think Darren had this project in mind for a few years, and so we were in contact, not directly with Darren, but previously with other producers. And then when it became like more serious, in the sense that we knew that we would do it, then when I was in LA, I've met Darren, and yeah, and since we've just done it as usual, I would say.
And Stephen, how did you come on board? I believe you're a friend of Darren's and you'd wanted to work together for a while. Can you
I mean, Darren and I are our careers. We built our careers in parallel paths. Darren being a writer, me being a producer, but we had never worked together. And in this project in particular, I'd say about 2.5 years prior to production, when he had the idea. For many years, Darren had talked about, wouldn't it be fun, to do a story in Paris? And as he started to develop it, he engaged me quite a bit in the discussions, story ideas, etc. And given my background internationally and my sort of comfort level internationally in terms of work, while Darren and I had traveled and we'd been at various times in Paris and elsewhere in Europe together, he knew that I had quite a bit of experience working internationally, and that it was something that I enjoyed doing, and I think provided him with some comfort level and security that he'd have a producing partner with him in Paris.
So I'm not quite sure who to go to on this one to start with, but originally, did you think you'd shoot the whole thing in Paris? Because it's quite unusual to do even the studio work. Should I start with Stephen?
Sure, I can begin. There had been discussion early on about possibly splitting, between Paris and New York. Darren, has been active in New York City as with his other shows. But it was really Darren's desire to do this all in Paris. I mean, it is Paris. The show is Paris. Aside from bits and pieces that take place in Chicago, it was for the authenticity of the show. What better place than to be where it takes place? So, and that's how Paris, really came about on a creative level. Obviously, when you're looking at the finances and budget and all of that that's a major consideration. Raphael can talk a bit more toward that point, but it actually, to that point, to the budget point, it worked out great to be in Paris. And you can't, Paris is Paris. and the show, everyone, for anyone who's seen Emily in Paris, I can't imagine it being done elsewhere. It's sort of like, so many shows historically, previously, that our New York shows end up filming in Toronto, and you do a little bit in New York, but you don't get that, there's nothing like getting the feeling of being in a place. And so it was really the desire to do this in Paris and in France.
Then I guess money's important. So Raphael, how did you convince them that it made sense to shoot everything there?
Basically, like first, when we started to work on a budget and everything, I had a budget that was done by the New York team, and of course, it was split between like exterior location in Paris, or even a few locations, and then the interiors in New York. And so we basically, I did, and I've done that many times, and I'm sure I will do that in the future as well. We did a comparison between Paris and New York and shooting between the two countries or just in Paris. And it ended up being less expensive being in France. So despite the high fringes that people sometimes could complain about with the tax rebates and everything added, and if you really take all the salaries together, not like just focusing on the fringes percentages, we were less expensive to shoot the entire season in France. And I cannot say like way less expensive, but still like enough to of course say that and to consider it. And of course, then if you add up all the creative aspects of it and the logistic aspect as well, like we ended up shooting the entire season in France.
And you'd done something like that before, hadn't you? With
Yeah, it was the same when we shot the entire season 2 for Patriot, where when they've contacted me, they wanted to come only for 10 days in France and then do the rest in Prague. And in that case, we did it as well. And we were slightly more expensive to shoot it in France, but like we were talking on something like a $20 million project. We were like maybe 300,000 more expensive in France. But then the studio Amazon decided to shoot the entire thing in France, which at the end was, of course, better because we were able to cross-board the entire schedule, and it was better for the actors and everything. And at the end, we of course made some savings throughout the production, and so it was as well a good thing. So.
And how much was the trip or the tax rebate for international production part of this decision? I mean, it gives about 30% rebate, and then there's this new 10% on top for special effects or digital work. I guess that was a key part of the calculation.
On Emily, we didn't have the 40%, and I'm not sure that the show is really driven by VFX, so it's not that we will be able to spend 2 million, or maybe we could, but like not for season 1 for sure. So we benefit from the 30%, and of course it has its influence, because if you don't have the rebate, then like when you make the math, we would be more expensive in New York. But we were comparing net numbers, meaning like the rebate from New York and the rebate from France.
So Stephen, back to you. So you decided to shoot everything in France. Did that make a change in terms of the crew, and obviously the crew did, but and in terms of the cast? I mean, did that had you had other ideas in terms of the casting, and was it always going to be this very French cast, or maybe
no, I mean,
cast out of LA or something? I don't know.
It was envisioned to be the mix of the American cast and French cast. And so, and it would have meant, had we not done this in France, we would have ended up bringing, that cast to New York or wherever else we were filming. And then in terms of crew, obviously, I would say, aside from our directors and cinematographer and the producers, the crew was French. And there's an efficiency, obviously, in staying with the same crew throughout the production period. But back to cast, it was always envisioned, as Darren developed the characters, that they were they're French actors. So and there's an extraordinary casting pool to choose from, like amazing talent in France. So these were the actors. It really starts, and I'm speaking for Darren, it starts for him purely on the creative basis, and how is this going to be, again, as I said earlier, authentic to the story. And there are, I'm sure, many French actors in the States, but we're really proud of the cast that we ended up getting, and so that's basically, it was envisioned to sort of be these characters.
And in terms of like work, you've worked in lots of different countries. I mean, what was it like working with French crew? They do have this reputation for excellence, but I mean, also sometimes there are these like myths about working hours and restrictions. But is it any different from working in LA or New York? I don't know.
The hours are slightly different. I mean, I think in terms of what you're permitted, it's about an hour or 2 hours less, but the crew was great. And I'm not, I feel like I'm here as like this promoter of France, but it really was exceptional. They do, strive for excellence. There's tremendous pride from everyone, from from each department in terms of what they're doing. And there are big differences, in terms of like in New York, when you're filming, the drivers, are part of the Teamsters and generally aren't really, they do their job and they do it great and all of that, but they're not as engaged in sort of what's happening on set. And in, Paris, our drivers would want to, when they weren't driving, like watch, what was happening, what was being filmed. And I think that added to this tremendous camaraderie, which helps the entire process. So of course I had heard, I had in my own mind these myths of like, the hours are so stringent, and if you go beyond 10 hours, they're going to, walk off the set. It wasn't like this at all. If we went into overtime, everyone was there together. The camaraderie was wonderful. So it was really a great experience. And, we're very excited for the next season that, we have the same crew coming back. And which is sort of proof, I think, to how engaged everyone, was in the story and the making of something that, that we're very proud of.
So going now into the locations and the studios, just Raphael, just quickly on the studios, because you built the office where the marketing firm is, that's in the studio. So can you just explain a little bit about that? Where was it? Where did you shoot it? What was the studio? Which one did you use in Paris?
We used La Cité du Cinéma, which is just in Saint-Denis, like a few minutes away from the Paris center. But there's other studios as well in Paris. We have great facilities, and they tend to be, as everywhere else in Europe, I would say, like London or Germany, now pretty full with all the series and the shoots that are happening. But now we secured. We used 2 stages at La Cité du Cinéma, and we were just going back and forth depending on our schedule. But it was good. We've built Emily's office and then the two apartments.
Oh yeah, the apartments, of course. Yeah. And the other thing that struck me about this, the depiction of Paris, is that it is Paris. Of course, it's Paris, but it's not the Eiffel Tower Paris. It's like it's all those places that we know, but we don't necessarily know. So, I mean, like you shot in the Musée d'Art Forain, or you have to tell me the translation for that, Danya, Raphael. I can never remember the translation. Or the the illumination exhibition. And so, how did you find these locations and these settings? Stephen, maybe you were with Darren, and then maybe also Raphael afterwards.
Well, and Stephen, we of course. Yeah. We first comes the scripts, and of course what Darren has in mind, and he knows Paris, so there's many locations that he had an idea about, or we were like walking in the cities, and so I have to say that for the Atelier des Lumières, for instance, Darren knew the place, and he asked us if we were able to go and shoot there. So this is what we did first: is we get in touch with the people there, and they were welcoming us, so that was one thing. And for the Musée des Arts Forains, and of course many other locations, it depends on the crew and our location managers. Or this one is a place that I knew, and the production designers as well. So when we read the scripts and the pages, and sometimes we have ideas and we exchange, it's like what's great about this job is basically to exchange, and it's not like one person saying something. It's like we can talk about things and come with ideas. And well, Stephen will talk about the location manager and all the team that we had, but they were able to find and secure great locations everywhere in Paris and slightly outside as well.
Yeah, so. I mean, just like as an example with the Musée Art Forain.
Yeah, sorry.
No, my French accent is terrible. But anyway, we needed a location for a big gala, and of course, there's all types of places, but so our location manager, took me and a few key people around, and we looked at different things, gather pictures, and then we walk into this particular location, and it's fascinating. I mean, it is something that people are, when I say the general public population in the world, they're not familiar with this place, but it was like walking onto a big movie set already built. And so And it was unique. It was something that we haven't seen. So those are factors. I mean, I think we do capture some of the iconic landmarks of Paris. We have the Eiffel Tower, but in the background and all of that. But we, wanted to be, again, Emily is discovering a city, and we want to discover that city and go on that journey with her. And so the locations are definitely, a character in the show. And we, wanted to make sure people know we're in Paris. And I don't think there's any doubt from what we see, but also to show, the reality, a bit of reality, a realness, while still being that kind of polished, Darren Star type show.
But when we were talking before this talk, I remember you mentioning a little bit about Sex and the City, and about how when Darren had first made that series, it had been harder to get locations in New York. And I was
I believe, and I wasn't, of course, I was not involved in that, other than in, discussions when Darren was, developing Sex and the City, and it was all taking place in New York City. And at that time, production, there were no production, tax incentives in New York City. So much has changed. And so there was not a lot of production because it was deemed sort of prohibitively expensive. But again, he really, wanted the authenticity of the city, and he got it. And of course, New York ultimately is a character in the city, in the show. So it wasn't dissimilar in terms of, that choice of a location of where to be. And it worked out great for Sex and the City as a show, and it worked out great for New York City as a production hub. And it sort of revived production, both in television and film in New York, and subsequently these tax incentives, et cetera. So, but back to Emily in Paris is a similar journey. I mean, as I said earlier, it's the authenticity, how, it would be such a cheat to do Paris elsewhere and, get all the feel. And as Raphael talked about, in terms of what could have been done elsewhere in terms of interiors, ultimately it worked out, quite favorable for us to stay in Paris and do everything there.
And so, Raphael, going back to you, Stephen was talking about, the practicalities of shooting in a big city. How shoot friendly is Paris in terms of letting you shut down roads or get access to big buildings? Can you comment on that? And do you get help? And what does an international production do if they want to shoot somewhere?
We have the support of the city, and you were mentioning before that, like Mission Impossible that we did, where of course without the help of the city, and actually even more than the city, the state at a different level, we would not have been possible to shoot all this action sequence that we've done. And for Emily, actually this as well, a lot of shoots, and as it could be if you're referring as well to New York, I know that there's some districts sometimes where you cannot shoot because they are like in the red zones for a certain amount of time or weeks. You cannot go there. And to try to avoid that before, and when we were planning to shoot Emily, we went to the Bureau du Cinéma and Mission Cinéma in Paris and talked to Michel Gomez, who's in charge of that. And I've asked him if there was a specific district that he would like us maybe to go and try to avoid the problems, because of course we have kind of a big circus, and it's not like we can just move around like that, and we have trucks and we've got trailers as other shows, and sometimes a bit more. And it was part of our process, and this is also why we ended up in the 5th arrondissement, and part of of course, led by the creative, but we were thinking about maybe we can go there, or maybe not Saint-Germain, if you know Paris, or the 6th, and saying we were in the 5th, and it ended up being a great decision, and I think artistically it works fine. I have to say as well, because that's the reality of it, is over the years it's been more and more complicated to shoot in Paris because there are less streets available, and the mayor wants to basically shut down all the cars in Paris, which of course has an effect on the way we can shoot, but I understand that, so we have to deal with it. But besides these decisions, the city still helping us. But I have to say it's becoming more complicated. But I also feel the same when you're shooting in London or when you're shooting in big cities. Like it's more and more complicated, and also difficult to find places to park our trucks and have our unit bases. But we still can do it. We've done it on this show. I think there's another great show on Netflix, Lupin, that you may have heard since the release, that has been shot in Paris as well. So it's possible. I'm not saying that it cannot be doable, but still, it works. And it's not that expensive. And the city, you don't have to pay as well. This is quite a good thing. You don't pay the city to shoot. So
you don't have to pay permits.
Permits are free. You pay the car park like any other cars. That's normal, but you don't pay for permits, and so that's a welcoming.
Was there anything, Stephen, that struck you when you were there that was particularly sort of surprising when you finally know? Sorry, that's putting you on the spot. I didn't ask you that question. But it's because I'm surprised that you don't have to pay for permits. So I don't know. Is there anything that's
I mean, when we started production, I think to kick off a new show, and we started in August, which is a very quiet time in Paris. So it enabled us to sort of get our legs going without tremendous crowds and traffic. I will say that compared to a lot of other places, that people, there were people, spectators who come, kind of try to get a look, but people were really respectful of the set, wherever we might be. It wasn't like, if our, locations, people were telling people to, quiet down or try to redirect foot traffic. People followed along. There was not this sort of, I've seen this where people, on the streets might get very aggressive, like, well, it's my right to cross right now. You can't block me. Tremendous respect. And that, I don't want to say it's terrible that respect has to be surprising anywhere to find, so it's not in particular to Paris, but just, when that happens, I'm like, okay, this is great. They're very welcoming. And, when we take sort of where Gabrielle's restaurant's located and Emily's apartment, that's a small square. And we spent a lot of time there, and it's a residential area. And we didn't have neighbors, throwing hot water out at us. They were actually quite welcoming, So it was nice because we were there, late nights, and at least, if there were any issues, I was shielded from them. Certainly, all our talent was shielded. So maybe that's an attribute of how our French crew was working as well. But it felt quite welcoming, and that was good, because you do get these sort of myths about, oh, the French, this or that. It's not like that, and and that was never really my experience in France to begin with. I think people are people everywhere, but we felt very welcomed in the city wherever we were. So I don't recall any issues.
So just, and another brief question. Obviously it's really important that you're going to be in a city for 2 months with your stars. How did, not personally about Lily Collins, but how did the cast enjoy it, the international cast and crew living in Paris? Did they have the same frustrations as Emily, or did they enjoy their time there?
Paris is Paris. If you look at the Instagrams of our talent, I think it tells a story of what their time was like. They loved, I'm speaking for them, and as well as, for the directors, the producers that came from the US. I think we can collectively say it was a great experience. On their days off, there's wonderful places to explore without being bothered on the streets. And so it was, what can I say? As locations go, it's fabulous. I've spent time in locations in the US that I felt like an alien, in the middle of nowhere for months on end. And it's, what do you do with yourself? There's, Walmart to go. That's about it. So it was that truly, I think everyone really loved being there.
So you're going to be going back. I mean, the Emily in Paris 2 it's been confirmed. Can you tell me anything, like when you might shoot, or is it going to still be in the same part of Paris, or will we be going outside of Paris even more? Anything?
No, I can't. Stay tuned. The story's all being developed as we speak, and I'm sure people familiar with Darren's work and his other shows. There will be lots of fun twists and turns to look forward to. But you're not going to get any spoilers out of me today. We will be filming some point in 2021. All that's being figured out and sorted out and all of that. So that's about as much as I can tell you. But we will be back with smiles on our face and and a lot of enthusiasm.
And there's something I read just before we came live, and I meant to put it past you. I read in one of these fanzines for Emily in Paris that there was a trailer or a teaser that was put out or something. Is that correct? And it was shot during the pandemic. Is that the case? Just because it's interesting if you did. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was already shot beforehand or something.
No, nothing shot in Paris for the show. No,
right.
Nothing.
Okay, cool.
No.
That was a miss.
Yeah, no, there was like a video that was done in New York, but not to do with the show.
Okay.
That involved Ashley Park, the Mindy character, but it's not an Emily in Paris moment or anything.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So, but Raphael, that does bring me on to the point of, obviously we're still battling with the pandemic. Are there any updates you can give me, as you're somebody who's very close to that in the moment, in terms of shooting in France?
At the moment, and as the president of the CNC said it, we can shoot, and I didn't do 400 shoots, of course, but I was able to basically organize and manage 2 of those, and it's pretty well. How can I say? It's life as you know it during the pandemic. Of course, the restaurants are closed. We keeping our distance. We have an entire thing. Well, we are wearing masks, distanciations, and getting tested twice or 3 times a week, depending if we want to follow the SAG rules or all the protocols that have been put in place. It's not as nice as life could be, but I think it's the same for everyone. But at least we are one of the industry that could work and function. And as we were saying when we were talking, is I think our industry is basically always a kind of a problem solver. This is what we do all the time. It could be for locations and many other things. So we spend our days finding solutions. So this one is another problem in front of us, and then we have to deal with it and live with it. And so far we can do it. It could be frustrating, but at least we are happy because we are able to work.
And are you getting many inquiries at the moment in terms from international?
For shoots? Well, yes. I cannot mention them all because as well, I'm under NDA. But yes, I think just for my company and people that I'm working with, I will have different projects this year, and including Emily, of course, which is the main one. And there's more to come. Like I've been contacted yesterday for another shoot. So it's coming. And of course, they always have the same questions: if we can shoot, not shoot. But thanks to what we've done in 2020, I think people know that it's doable. And so we have the crew, we've got the equipment, we've got the locations. Yeah. The thing is, of course, if you want to shoot a city alive with all the restaurants open, then that's something that we may have to wait a few more weeks to be able to do that.
I've got some questions coming through now. So can I go over to some questions with you?
Sure.
I'll just read them out, sorry. So this is from somebody called Christopher Schiller. And he's asking, how much capacity is there for new production in Paris and its environs at the moment, and how busy do you foresee becoming in the future? You've sort of answered that, but in essence, how quickly will it fill up?
Wow. Honestly, I don't have the answer. The only thing that I feel and I know is talking about the European productions. we all know or can see that London is pretty full, and it's been months like that, thanks to all the big blockbusters that are shooting there. So some of these productions now, or even other productions are, and also thanks to the tax rebates that we have in France, but they're also going to Germany and France. So I know that Germany is as well, like Berlin is going to have many shoots this year, and it's going to be the same for Paris. So once these main places going to be full, like, I don't know, it depends, because if you were telling me, okay, we're going to have like 5 films like Mission Impossible coming to shoot in Paris, this will not be possible. But at the moment, that's not the case. So they are big projects in Europe at the moment. And I'm sorry, I cannot give names.
It's fine. But, I mean, I guess, but also linked to that.
We can still have films, and that's why when people are calling me, and depending on the period, like I say, yes, you can do this or that. But it is, and that's why we are already talking with Steven and the productions. Like, we have to book the HOD, like the head of departments now, because it's going to be full. Well, full no, but if you want to work with a crew that you like to work with, you need to call them in advance. That's for sure.
I mean, just briefly, I mean, outside, we're talking about Paris at the moment, but outside of Paris, the south of France, the capacity there is also expanding, isn't it? And plans for it to expand.
Yeah, well, over the years, and thanks to the different networks, there's been more series as well. So of course, like, you've got the pool for the crew is slightly larger. But you still have like a kind of a maximum capacity, and I don't really know it. I've experienced in the past moments where we were struggling to find crews. If you know, like, for instance, it might sound strange, but like, if you're looking for, but that's everywhere like last year, for instance, like 2 years ago, because not in 20, but in 2019, we were shooting a film in Marseille, and we were struggling to find a financial controller, but it was not in Marseille. It was like even in the States and everywhere. Like, so there are specific departments that if you have too many productions, that it's difficult to find people that are qualified. So, and for everyone who's starting in this industry, you can say, oh, if you want to be an accountant, then there's probably a future for you. That's for sure. It's not maybe the best or the most attractive position that you can think about, but this one is pretty like, it's complicated to find a great crew in France and as well everywhere else. But we've been shooting films in France like for many years, as you know that it's not only an industry, it's also an art, and we shoot more than 200 films per year. So you can imagine that there's the pool of technicians in place to be able to shoot those. So now, of course, many of those are becoming series or different budgets and things. But so yeah, it depends on the size of the movie and things. But
so I have another question here. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to answer it, but this is from Angela Gawley. Are you able to share the full production budget for Emily in Paris, or the cost of an average episode? Steven?
No.
No, fair enough. So there's a question here. So Philippe Audidor, I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I haven't. He just had a couple of questions. How long did you shoot in Paris for? And how much time in advance did you have to start location scouting in order to secure the various location studios in time for the shoot?
We filmed from mid-August until mid-November
2019.
2019. In terms of locations, Raphael may be able to sort of articulate better. I know that, at the very beginning, before starting, there were a bunch of locations for the first few episodes that were chosen. And then we were continuing to do the writing throughout production. So you film normally in television in blocks. So as we were, filming, like, say, the first block, we would start scouting locations for the second block a few weeks before, certain things that we knew, well in advance, we were able, Raphael, again, you correct me if I'm wrong, able to secure, for like sort of a longer period of time. But some of the locations were secured just, a couple weeks before, which isn't ideal. And, and others, that, again, that we knew we would be in, throughout the series, we were able to secure, well in advance.
Yeah, well, so to answer, we were shooting between 6 and 7 days per episode, so that gives you the time. Regarding the location, normally you should ask the permit like 4 weeks in advance, and if possible more. Doesn't mean that sometimes, but we should not say it. And as it's the same for every other shoots, you're able to have a permit like just a few days before, because you may thanks to, well, let's say you want to shoot in a specific street, and then you're finding out that there's going to be another shoot on the same day, or there's going to be another event. Like I can't remember, then this is where maybe Michel Gomez from the city of Paris would be able to answer, but like there's more than 3,000 different events in Paris in general during the year. So you also need to work with your own schedule, the availability of your crew and cast, and as well like the availability of the location. So that's why you have to do that in advance as well. It's not even like Paris is a welcoming city, and I think it would be everywhere else as well in France, because I've been lucky to shoot a bit everywhere, and I've always been welcomed. But from a logistic point of view, you also need to say that you're going to come, and so because there are many other things like street works and then things that in the city that you need to take care of, or if there's a bus line that you need to deviate, or like this has to be organized. So that's why you have to do that in advance. Yeah.
This throws.
Yes, go on. Sorry.
This just throws up another question that I meant to ask you. Obviously, there are the scenes which are set outside of Paris. Is it in Château de Sonnet, I think? And I was just wondering, how do you find those locations? I mean, there are so many chateaux in France. I wouldn't know where to start. Big and small. How does that happen? And how long did you take to find that location?
I think we can, it was I cannot say an easy one, but the production designer Anne Sebel basically guided us to that location because she knew the place and she knew the owner, so it was kind of an easy one. If you have the time and the money, you can have like scouts, as you can imagine, like if you're looking for a chateau. In this specific case, like we were looking as well for a location that was not that far from Paris, because as Stephen was mentioning, as we are shooting, of course, some of the scripts sometimes come up, and then we need to organize ourselves. We also have to deal with many different aspects. So this one was like we were not able to basically go way we had to be close to Paris, and because it's also our job to be have a certain efficiency in terms of production and production value, as well as we're trying to find locations that look outstanding without doing things. So that's why we went as well for the Musée des Arts Forains, because as Steve said, like it was a location that was already dressed almost, and we had a great production value. It was great for the script, great for the show, and for us it was as well a good location, because we were able to get there without like changing everything. And we can't have the budget for Emily in Paris, but we always are, and we are always like really a budget conscious. So it's not that we can do what we want and when we want. So
I've just thought of the translation for Musée des Arts Forains. It's the Museum of Fairground Arts, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's an extraordinary place in Paris where there are all these different old-fashioned fairground exhibits. If anybody ever goes to Paris, it's a one to check out. I've got a few more questions here. So Roger Simons, and I'm reading it out. So it's laudable that Emily was made entirely in Paris, unlike so many other US shows that only shoot exteriors here. But given it was a new show made in France, what were the politics behind, no local DP or director being hired? Did you look for the right profile? And if you did, what was missing in local talent that stopped them being used on a show like Emily? That's a question that's been sent in. So I don't know if there's any comment on that.
No, it's fine. I don't know, Rogers.
I Raphael, go ahead.
No, it's fine. There was no restrictions. 99% of the crew is French, and I think that for the directors and the DP, also Darren wanted to also work with people that he knew, and it was a creative choice and not at all like something like we don't want to explore French, like maybe hiring a French DP or something. It was just like Darren called Steven to be the producer. I was as well a producer on the show, and it's just like it's important as well for any show runners and creators that as well to be surrounded, like not completely, but sometimes with key members and key crew members that they would like to work with.
I mean, Darren had worked with, two of our directors and previously, and he really, had a comfort level having them there, as well as, and then Zoe Cassavetes, while not French, her husband's French. She lived in Paris for many years, and Darren knew her, was familiar, very familiar with her work. So that's how it happened. And our cinematographer, again, was someone who our directors had worked with and Darren had worked with. So there was that initial comfort level, but as Raphael said, 90% plus. I mean, the rest of the crew was.
Yeah, basically, we can name the people who came from the States, but like Steven, of course, but Darren, some of the actors and the cast that and like the directors and the DP, and of course Patricia for the costume, but like we will not question that as well, like due to the long and successful relationship that she has with Darren, and that makes the show.
So to put you on the spot, but do you think that might change in the future, Stephen, for the next episode? Because I mean, obviously Netflix now has a hub in France, and they're developing a lot of talent, and Lupin was a French show. Do you think that might be something that could change for future?
It's possible. I mean, we're looking at directors, and not directors like directors from really all over the world. So. Yeah. It's a mixture of we're not looking for a director specifically from an area or a country, but we are looking at directors from really everywhere, and then it becomes a matter of availability and their feel for the show and all of those discussions that go into making a decision. So it could change for sure. Yeah.
So, and then
Andrew Fleming will be coming back, and that's been announced, and he's an executive producer on the show as well, so he will be coming back for some of the episodes. But we're the world is out there. So.
And then I have another question here from somebody called Rebecca Lamarche, who's a filmmaker and actor. And she is asking, is development and writing done in France as well as the US? I think, Stephen, you can answer this, or maybe you both can answer this, but Stephen, maybe. I think Darren wrote a lot of it in France, didn't he?
Well, it started here in the US. First of all writing now is happening via Zoom. So people, again, can be, our writers for this season are, we have some new writers coming in as well, but and then we have the core group from the last season, and they're in LA, some are in New York, some because of pandemic maybe in their homes, elsewhere in the country. And then when production, as we went into pre-production and close to production, our writers did come to Paris last season. The only restrictions now will be, whatever the COVID Writers Guild restrictions are of writers traveling. As I said, like with the WGA, I believe no one can be, the writers aren't permitted to be in person together. Everything's on Zoom. So we'll see as things develop. I mean, certainly, we love for everyone to kind of be together, and the writers, as I said, did come during season 1. And to Paris, and we, they continued writing the episodes in Paris.
But did you tap into? I mean, obviously, Darren, I think, had lived in Paris, but did you tap into French? Some of the scenes are quite. You'd have to live in Paris to know some of the things, the attitudes and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you have people who were reading the script for authenticity, or saying that would never happen, or?
There was, consulting, in a casual way. Yeah. That sort of thing.
And
we could ask Raphael, would this ever happen? For example, we had enough people, around us, and everyone, Darren's very collaborative that way. He likes to sort of gather what people think. So, there was a definite input from people in France, and people who live in Paris, people who live elsewhere in France.
So we've had a lot of questions. I mean, I know we've covered this already in the talk, but we've had a lot of questions about the impact of COVID on production in France. I mean, I know you've touched on it before, Raphael, but would you be able to just, once again, just sort of how your sense at the moment and what's going on? Domestic productions are still going on. It's just more complicated for international.
Still going on. I know that it might change slightly, like it would be slightly more complicated for US citizens, for instance, to come to shoot in France. But it's completely doable. I've done that for scouts. Like I'm doing a scout next week, and I have a crew coming from the States. Like from last Sunday, I even had a message from Air France telling me that now every citizens that are coming from Europe will have to have a test 72 hours prior getting onto a flight. But that's a PCR test. So that's kind of the world we're living in. I would say, if you want to compare France to other countries, like if you want to go now and shoot a film in Australia, good luck. Like they have great crews and everything, but you cannot enter the country. And so it's slightly different here. You can do it. So it is as well recommended when you arrive to have a quarantine, but it's not like set in stone, and things are changing almost every week at the moment, as it is everywhere in the world. But when it comes to the shooting, you can do the shooting. You wear your mask, you respect distanciation with your crew. You can ask Tom Cruise about it if you want. I think we all heard that a few weeks ago. I was serious about it, and that's a good thing. And we can shoot. We have access to the locations. We have access, hotels are open, so you can have. It's just that the restaurants are closed, and maybe in the next week we will be in a different lockdown, like we were in October, and shops will be closed as well. But even when the shops were closed, we were able to shoot. So it has an impact creatively, because of course, if you're shooting in the streets, and let's say that your script says it is full of life, and of course that's different, as you know that. But in another way, it also could be an advantage, because for us, when we are moving from a location to another, the traffic is better. So it's
so that's pros and cons.
As well, that also because it is not as nice to wear a mask whole day and everything, that the crew is slightly more focused. Not saying that they are not when we are working, but it could as well help.
So I have one last question. I think this will make this the last question, and it's quite a detail one. And it goes back to what I was saying before about people's images of France. But it says here, is it true that in France there is only a 40-hour work week, and can this be overcome for production? And you both sort of answered this, but Raphael or Stephen, you said you had everybody was always working and it wasn't an issue.
Yeah, it was for me, from my perspective, we were working like you work anywhere in our business in the world. Basically, it was full on weeks and days, and the weekends came, we were all tired, as is normal in production. So that at least from my perspective, it was not different.
There are rules to respect. It's everywhere. Right, they are the same in Europe. Like there's a limit, and of course, but we are meant to be limited to 48 hours, but we can work 60 hours per week if we need to. This is what we've done as well on Mission Impossible, where we shot 60 hours every week, and we shot 6 days when we had to, and we as well didn't stop for lunch, because they say, oh, you cannot stop for lunch. So it is doable. You have to, of course, talk to the crew about it. It's not that you can impose things. But the crew is really flexible. They're great technicians, as I said, because that also, it's a huge difference. You may not, it's difficult to explain, but you can feel it when you're shooting in France. It's not only in the industry, and then maybe before being in the industry, it's an art form. So basically, the crew is involved. And as Stephen was saying, the drivers are PAs as well. They are involved in the production and they want to know what's going on. And it's just like they're not just coming and sitting behind their wheel. And you feel that difference, and you feel that with every technicians. I remember when I was shooting in New York, because I've shot in New York, I've been lucky to shoot in New York, and it's a great city, but like between the text, the grip, the K grip was just reading a book, for instance. I've seen that. And in France, it's not going to be like that. The crew will be behind the director, it would be behind the projects, and they would do everything they can to help. But at least this is experience I have for many years now. And that's why I have to say that if not all the directors, but possibly all the directors that I've been lucky to work with, when they finish with the experience and with the crew, they want to come back. This is what they want. They were trying to say, "Oh, I would love to come back in France." Right. So, and I'm not saying to say, "Oh yeah, lucky, we are the best country." It's not. I've been lucky to shoot everywhere in the world, and I love to shoot everywhere. It's a great country to shoot in, and you will not be disappointed if you're coming.
So I think on that note, I'm going to wrap. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Sorry we couldn't get any sneak news on Emily in Paris too, but we'll just have to wait for future announcements. And I'd just like to say once again that this Screen Daily Talk was organised as part of the Locations Trade Show Paris Images, which is running online at the moment until January the 29th. And that the event was co-sponsored by the CNC Film France and Film Paris region. And just one last plug before we go. Screen is holding another Screen Daily Talk on Thursday, in which we're going to be discussing the upcoming edition of the Rotterdam International Film Festival, which is running as a special online event. And they're going to be talking us through how that's going to work. Anyway, I would like to say a really big thank you to Raphael and Stephen. It was really interesting talking to you from New York and from the south of France at the moment for Raphael. And, fingers crossed that you're both going to get back on set in Paris very, very soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tell you more about it. Sure. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.